You wake up, reach for your phone before your eyes have fully adjusted to the light, and within minutes your mind belongs to someone else. A headline pulls you toward anxiety. A message reminds you of something unfinished. A video promises happiness in 30 seconds, but somehow leaves you feeling emptier than before. By the time you've climbed out of bed, you've already compared yourself to strangers, worried about a future that hasn't happened, and forgotten to notice the quiet miracle of simply being alive. The strangest part is that it feels normal. Somewhere along the way, exhaustion stopped being a warning sign and became a personality. Busyness became a badge of honor. Distraction became the background music of everyday life. We tell ourselves we're staying informed, staying productive, staying connected. Yet beneath the endless movement, there's an uncomfortable question most people avoid asking. Why does life feel so full and yet so empty? You may have felt it during a late-night drive when the roads were silent, and your thoughts suddenly became louder than the engine. Maybe it arrived while scrolling through an endless stream of carefully edited lives, wondering why everyone else seemed to know something you didn't. Or perhaps it appeared in the middle of an ordinary afternoon, when everything looked fine from the outside, but something inside whispered, "There has to be more than this." That whisper is easy to ignore. Modern life has become remarkably efficient at drowning it out. Yuval Noah Harari has spent years studying how humanity evolved, how civilizations rose, and how the stories we tell ourselves shape everything from governments to personal identity. One of his most unsettling observations isn't about artificial intelligence or ancient empires. It's about attention. In a world overflowing with information, the truly scarce resource isn't knowledge anymore. It's the ability to know what deserves your attention in the first place. And maybe that's where everything begins. Not with changing your entire life overnight, not with becoming a different person, but with learning how to reclaim the one thing every system, every advertisement, every notification, and every algorithm quietly competes for every single day. Your awareness, because once your attention is captured, your choices slowly follow. And once your choices become habits, those habits begin writing the story of your life without asking your permission. The unsettling truth is that most people don't consciously choose the life they're living. They inherit it. Piece by piece. Notification by notification. Tiny decisions repeated so often that they become invisible. The human brain loves familiarity. It doesn't ask whether a habit makes you happy. It asks whether it's predictable. If something is repeated enough times, your mind begins treating it as safe, even when it's quietly damaging you. That's why changing a life rarely starts with a dramatic decision. It starts with noticing the invisible patterns you've stopped questioning. Have you ever wondered why some mornings you wake up full of possibility, while others feel heavy before your feet even touch the floor? The circumstances may be identical. The room hasn't changed. The weather may be the same. Yet something inside feels completely different. Most people assume motivation comes first, but more often than not, awareness comes first. Long before your emotions change, your attention changes. And that small shift has echoed throughout human history. Thousands of years ago, our ancestors weren't overwhelmed by endless choices. Their greatest concerns were survival, shelter, and finding enough food before the next season arrived. Their brains evolved to detect danger with incredible efficiency, because overlooking a threat could mean death. That ancient wiring still lives inside you. Only the predators have changed. Instead of hearing rustling bushes, you hear notification sounds. Instead of fearing wild animals, you fear being left behind. Instead of scanning forests for danger, your eyes scan screens, searching for approval, certainty, or signs that you're enough. Your nervous system doesn't always know the difference. To it, uncertainty is uncertainty, threat is threat. Whether it's a hungry lion or an unanswered email at work. And that's why so many people spend their lives trapped in a state their ancestors were only supposed to experience temporarily. Constant alertness, constant comparison, constant anticipation. Your body believes you're surviving, even when you're simply sitting at your desk. This isn't weakness. It's evolution meeting a world it was never designed for. History reveals something fascinating. Every civilization believed it stood at the center of reality. Ancient Egyptians built monuments that reached toward eternity. The Romans believed their empire represented the pinnacle of human achievement. Medieval kingdoms placed faith above all else. The Industrial Revolution convinced millions that endless production would eventually create endless happiness. Each era had its own sacred belief. Our era has one too. That more is always better. More speed, more efficiency, more followers, more productivity, more possessions, more optimization. We've become experts at improving everything except the experience of being human. And that's where an uncomfortable contradiction appears. Technology has solved countless problems that once defined civilization. We travel farther than kings ever imagined. We hold more knowledge in our pockets than entire libraries contained centuries ago. We communicate across oceans instantly. We have comforts previous generations could only dream about. Yet anxiety continues rising. Loneliness spreads through crowded cities. People report feeling disconnected while being constantly connected. It's almost as though progress answered every question except the one that mattered most. How should we actually live? The ancient Greeks wrestled with that question beneath marble columns long before smartphones existed. Stoic philosophers watched empires rise and collapse, eventually realizing that external circumstances rarely determine inner peace. Marcus Aurelius ruled one of the greatest empires in history, yet his private reflections reveal a man constantly reminding himself not to become a prisoner of ego, fear, or distraction. Power couldn't protect him from his own mind, neither can success protect us. Centuries later, Buddhist monks reached similar conclusions from the opposite side of the world. They observed that suffering often grows from attachment. Not only attachment to possessions, but attachment to identities, expectations, and the endless craving for life to be different than it is right now. Different cultures, different languages, different centuries. Yet somehow they kept arriving at the same destination. The greatest battles aren't fought outside us. They're fought within attention itself. What do you notice? What do you ignore? What story are you rehearsing every day without realizing it? Those questions may sound simple, but they quietly determine the quality of an entire lifetime. Carl Jung believed that until people become conscious of the forces shaping them, those hidden forces will direct their lives while appearing to be fate. Think about that for a moment. How many decisions do you believe are completely your own? The music you listen to, the goals you chase, the clothes you wear, the opinions you defend, the fears you carry. How many of them emerged naturally from your deepest self? And how many were planted so gradually that they now feel like your own voice? This is where Harari's perspective becomes particularly unsettling. Human beings don't merely respond to reality. We respond to stories. Money is valuable because we collectively agree it is. Nations exist because millions believe in shared narratives. Corporations grow powerful because enough people trust symbols, brands, and promises. Even personal identity is, in many ways, a story continuously updated inside the mind. The remarkable thing about stories isn't that they're false. It's that they become real through belief. And if stories shape civilizations, they also shape mornings. You wake up believing you're either disciplined or lazy, successful or behind, confident or insecure, lucky or unlucky. Those quiet narratives begin influencing your behavior long before you consciously notice them. Eventually, they stop feeling like stories. They feel like reality itself. But what if the most important story in your life isn't the one you've been told? What if it's the one you've been repeating to yourself every single day? The brain is astonishingly efficient at protecting familiar identities, even painful ones. Someone who secretly believes they're not worthy of success may unknowingly reject opportunities that challenge that belief. Someone convinced they'll never find meaningful relationships may interpret every interaction as proof they're right. The mind doesn't simply seek truth, it seeks consistency. It would often rather be predictably miserable than unpredictably free. That realization changes everything, because it means your future isn't determined only by the events that happen to you. It's shaped by the habits that reinforce the story you believe about yourself. And habits are rarely dramatic. They are almost invisible, a conversation you avoid, a walk you postpone, a moment of silence replaced with another scroll, a promise you quietly break to yourself because no one else will notice. Except someone always notices, you do. Every small action becomes evidence for the person you're becoming, or evidence for the person you're slowly leaving behind. The remarkable thing is that your identity isn't rewritten through grand declarations. It's rewritten through ordinary moments, so small they almost escape attention. And perhaps that's why the most profound transformations in history, whether in civilizations or in individuals, rarely began with certainty. They began with a different way of seeing. Before any empire was built, before any revolution changed the world, before any philosopher reshaped human thought, someone first questioned an assumption everyone else accepted without hesitation. That same possibility exists every morning when you open your eyes. The question isn't whether your life is being shaped. It already is. The real question is whether you're the one shaping it, or whether something else has quietly taken your place. That question becomes even more unsettling when you realize that the human mind was never designed to see itself clearly. You can spend decades believing you're making rational decisions, while invisible forces quietly steer your behavior from behind the curtain. Your memories reshape themselves over time. Your emotions color your perception before logic ever gets a chance to speak. Your brain fills in missing information without asking your permission. What feels like certainty is often just a convincing story stitched together after the fact. Have you ever defended an opinion with complete confidence, only to discover months later that you were wrong? Not just slightly wrong, but completely mistaken. The strange part wasn't learning the truth. The strange part was realizing how absolutely certain you had felt before. That certainty is one of the mind's favorite illusions. Psychologists sometimes describe the brain less as a camera and more as a prediction machine. It isn't simply recording reality. It's constantly guessing what comes next based on past experience. Most of the time, those predictions help us move through the world effortlessly. You don't have to consciously calculate every step you take or analyze every facial expression you encounter. But the same mechanism that helps you survive can also trap you. If you've spent years believing the world is unsafe, your brain will become remarkably skilled at finding evidence that supports that belief. If you've convinced yourself that you're always falling behind, every success will feel temporary while every failure becomes permanent proof. The prediction becomes perception, and perception slowly becomes identity. This is where daily habits become something far more profound than routines. They become conversations with your nervous system. Every morning you choose stillness over immediate distraction. You're teaching your brain that not every moment requires urgency. Every time you pause before reacting in anger, you're reminding ancient survival circuits that not every disagreement is a life or death conflict. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, no matter how small, you're quietly rewriting the prediction your mind makes about who you are. Neuroscience calls this neuroplasticity, the brain's extraordinary ability to reorganize itself through repeated experience. But the science, remarkable as it is, only explains the mechanism. It doesn't capture the feeling. Think about walking through a forest after fresh snow. The first person has to carve a difficult path through untouched ground. But after enough people walk the same route, the trail becomes effortless. Your thoughts work much the same way. The beliefs you repeat become the paths your mind naturally follows. The beautiful part is that new paths can always be created. The difficult part is that old ones never disappear overnight. That's why real change often feels uncomfortable before it feels rewarding. You're asking your mind to stop taking the familiar road and begin walking through untouched terrain. Modern culture rarely tells us this. Instead, we're sold the fantasy of instant transformation. A new app promises a better life in 30 days. A motivational video convinces us that one burst of inspiration is enough to erase years of unconscious conditioning. A productivity system claims to solve problems that are far deeper than time management, yet anyone who has truly changed knows something different. Transformation is usually quiet. It happens in moments that nobody applauds. The morning you choose not to check your phone for the first 15 minutes after waking. The afternoon you notice your mind racing and simply observe it instead of obeying it. The evening you admit you were wrong without needing to protect your ego. None of these moments look extraordinary, but they are, because they interrupt patterns that may have been repeating for years. Carl Jung believed that much of human suffering comes from refusing to acknowledge the parts of ourselves we'd rather keep hidden. He called this the shadow, not evil, but everything we've pushed out of awareness because it felt uncomfortable, embarrassing, or painful. The irony is that what we refuse to face doesn't disappear. It simply begins making decisions on our behalf. The anger we deny leaks into our relationships. The fear we suppress disguises itself as perfectionism. The loneliness we ignore transforms into endless consumption. We buy more, we scroll more, we work more, not because those things satisfy us, but because they distract us from asking why satisfaction feels so distant. When was the last time you sat in complete silence without reaching for something to occupy your attention? No music, no podcast, no notification. Just you. For many people, that feels strangely uncomfortable. Not because silence is painful. Because silence introduces us to ourselves. And that's a meeting many of us have postponed for years. Harari has often warned that, in an age where algorithms know our preferences better than we do, self-awareness becomes one of the most valuable skills a person can develop. If someone else understands what captures your attention, what triggers your emotions, and what influences your decisions before you do, then who is really making your choices? It's a question that becomes more urgent every year. Your attention is no longer just a personal resource. It's an industry. Entire teams of neuroscientists, behavioral economists, designers and engineers spend their careers studying how to keep your eyes on a screen for just a little longer. Every swipe, every vibration, every recommendation is carefully refined through millions of experiments. Not because those companies necessarily want to harm you, but because your attention has become one of the most profitable commodities on earth. The consequence is subtle. Most people don't wake up one day and lose themselves. They lose themselves 5 minutes at a time. A habit here, a distraction there, 1,000 tiny compromises that seem insignificant on their own, until one day they look in the mirror and wonder where the years went. History offers an interesting contrast. Many of history's greatest thinkers intentionally protected periods of solitude. Not because they disliked people, but because they understood that original thought rarely survives constant interruption. Socrates wandered through conversations that challenged assumptions instead of reinforcing them. The Buddha stepped away from luxury to understand suffering at its roots. Marcus Aurelius wrote private reflections never intended for public applause. They all understood something our culture often forgets. Wisdom grows slowly, noise grows instantly. And in an economy built on speed, slowness becomes a quiet act of rebellion. This doesn't mean rejecting technology or romanticizing the past. Every generation imagines that previous centuries were somehow simpler, forgetting the hardships they carried. Our ancestors faced disease, famine, violence, and uncertainty on a scale most of us will never experience. The goal isn't to escape modern life. It's to remain fully human within it. Technology is a tool. The real question is whether you're holding the tool, or whether the tool is quietly holding you. Have you ever opened your phone to send one message, and somehow found yourself 20 minutes later watching videos you never intended to see? That's not a failure of willpower. It's a reminder that attention naturally follows what feels immediate, rather than what is meaningful. Meaning requires intention. Distraction only requires availability. This is why the smallest daily rituals often carry the greatest psychological weight. Not because the actions themselves are magical, but because they signal something deeper. Every intentional habit whispers the same message to your mind: I am choosing, rather than drifting. That distinction may seem minor. It isn't. A life of drifting can still appear successful from the outside. A respected career, financial security, social approval. Yet underneath, there's often a quiet feeling that someone else has been living your life. Nietzsche once suggested that becoming who you truly are requires tremendous courage because it demands abandoning comfortable illusions. We often interpret that as a dramatic call to greatness, but perhaps it's something much quieter. Perhaps becoming yourself begins by noticing all the ways you've been unconsciously trying to become someone else. The colleague who always seems more accomplished. The influencer whose life looks effortless. The friend who appears endlessly confident. Comparison has existed for thousands of years, but today's comparison is relentless. It follows you into your bedroom, your lunch break, your vacations, even the moments that once belonged only to your own thoughts. No wonder so many people feel disconnected from themselves. They're rarely alone with themselves anymore. Yet beneath all the noise, something remarkably steady remains: awareness. The part of you that notices your thoughts without becoming them. The part of you that can observe fear without immediately obeying it. The part of you that recognizes anger rising before it spills into words you'll later regret. That quiet observer has always been there. The challenge isn't creating it. The challenge is remembering to listen. Because every day offers a choice so small, it almost seems insignificant. You can continue reacting automatically to whatever demands your attention, or you can begin responding deliberately to what truly deserves it. That single shift doesn't change your life in an afternoon. It changes the direction your life travels. And direction, repeated over months and years, always matters more than speed. Which brings us to something surprisingly simple. If the quality of your life is shaped by what repeatedly captures your attention, then the most important habits aren't necessarily the most impressive ones. They're the ones that gently reclaim your awareness before the world decides where it will go. And those habits, though ordinary on the surface, have the power to quietly transform the story you tell yourself every single day. That story doesn't change because one extraordinary moment suddenly rewrites your life. It changes because ordinary moments begin pointing you in a different direction. The first habit isn't about becoming more productive. It's about protecting the first moments of your morning. Before the world tells you who to be, before headlines define your mood, before messages ask for your attention, give yourself a few quiet minutes to simply exist. Not to achieve anything, not to optimize yourself. Just to notice your own mind before everyone else has a chance to shape it. There's something deeply symbolic about those first moments after waking. They're like fresh snow before footprints appear. Whatever enters your mind first often leaves an emotional imprint that echoes through the rest of the day. A peaceful beginning doesn't guarantee a peaceful life, but it gives your mind something increasingly rare. A chance to hear its own voice. The second habit is learning to become curious about your thoughts, instead of believing every one of them. Most people treat thoughts like commands. I'm not good enough. I'll never change. Everyone else has figured life out except me. But a thought isn't a fact. It's an event happening inside consciousness. The moment you recognize that difference, something extraordinary happens. You create space between yourself and the story your mind is trying to tell. Have you ever noticed how two people can experience the exact same event and walk away with completely different interpretations? Reality matters, but interpretation often shapes experience even more. That's why awareness isn't passive, it's creative. It determines which story survives. The third habit is deliberately seeking moments of solitude. Not loneliness, solitude. There's a profound difference. Loneliness is feeling disconnected from others. Solitude is reconnecting with yourself. For thousands of years, artists, philosophers, scientists, and spiritual teachers all returned to silence whenever they needed clarity. They understood something our hyper-connected culture often forgets. Insight rarely arrives while you're consuming someone else's thoughts. It usually appears during the quiet space between distractions. Those moments may feel uncomfortable at first. Your mind will search for stimulation. It will invent reasons to check your phone. It will remind you of unfinished tasks. Stay there anyway. On the other side of that discomfort is often the first honest conversation you've had with yourself in a long time. The fourth habit is choosing one meaningful action every day that nobody else will ever applaud. Modern life quietly conditions us to seek visible progress. We celebrate promotions, followers, awards, and recognition. But character grows in places where no audience exists. Reading a few pages instead of scrolling. Keeping a promise to yourself. Apologizing when your ego wants to stay silent. Being kind when nobody is keeping score. These moments seem insignificant because they don't generate applause. Yet they're precisely the moments that define identity. Who you are isn't revealed when everyone is watching. It's revealed when no one is. The fifth habit is practicing conscious attention. Notice how often your mind lives somewhere other than the present. While eating, you're thinking about work. While working, you're thinking about the weekend. While resting, you're worrying about tomorrow. Life quietly slips through the cracks because the body remains in one place while the mind constantly escapes to another. This doesn't mean forcing yourself into endless positivity or pretending difficult emotions don't exist. It simply means returning, again and again, to the only place where life has ever actually happened. Right here. The present moment has become so ordinary that we've forgotten how extraordinary it truly is. Everything you've ever loved, every meaningful conversation, every unforgettable sunset, every laugh, every embrace, they all happened now, never yesterday, never tomorrow, always now. The sixth habit may be the hardest of them all. Question the stories that flatter your ego. Human beings naturally protect the identities they've built over time. We defend opinions, justify mistakes, and resist evidence that threatens our self-image. It's one of the mind's oldest survival strategies. But growth begins where certainty ends. Instead of asking, how can I prove I'm right? Try asking, what if I'm missing something? That single question has changed the course of scientific discoveries, philosophical revolutions, and personal lives. Humility isn't thinking less of yourself. It's becoming more interested in truth than in being correct. And truth has a remarkable way of setting us free from the prisons we unknowingly build. The seventh habit is remembering your own mortality. At first, that sounds dark. It isn't. Ancient Stoic philosophers reflected on death not to create fear, but to awaken gratitude. Because nothing clarifies priorities like remembering time is finite. How many arguments suddenly seem meaningless? How many worries lose their grip? How many dreams stop feeling impossible once you realize there isn't forever to postpone them? Death gives life its urgency, its beauty, its meaning. Perhaps the goal isn't to fear the end. Perhaps it's to stop postponing the beginning. If you've made it this far, there's something I'd genuinely love to hear from you. Which of these habits feels most difficult in your own life right now? Not the one you think you should choose, the one you honestly struggle with. Maybe it's protecting your attention. Maybe it's facing silence. Maybe it's letting go of an old story about yourself. Share it in the comments. Not because there's one right answer, but because someone reading your words may realize they're not carrying that struggle alone. The eighth habit is becoming intentional about what you consume. Not just food, ideas, conversations, entertainment, news, the people whose voices become part of your inner dialogue. Your mind is constantly absorbing information, even when you think you're simply passing time. Over weeks and months, those influences become invisible architects of your worldview. If you spend hours surrounded by outrage, your mind slowly expects conflict. If you spend your days immersed in comparison, contentment begins to feel unfamiliar. If every spare moment is filled with noise, wisdom has nowhere to settle. Ask yourself something simple. Who is shaping your thoughts today? And did you actually choose them? The ninth habit is practicing gratitude. Not as a forced exercise, but as an act of perception. The human brain naturally remembers danger more vividly than peace. That's why criticism lingers longer than compliments. It's why one difficult conversation can overshadow an entire day filled with small joys. Our ancestors survived because they noticed threats. But surviving and living aren't always the same thing. Gratitude gently retrains attention, not by denying hardship, but by refusing to let hardship become the whole story. Sometimes gratitude is grand. More often, it's astonishingly ordinary. Warm sunlight on your face. The sound of someone you love laughing in another room. The privilege of another ordinary morning. These moments don't demand attention. They quietly wait for it. The 10th and perhaps most important habit is ending each day with honest reflection.